They're the moment you can feel in your bones. She stops texting the same way. Her tone becomes colder. The warmth you once felt in her eyes fades into something distant, unreadable. And your instinct, the one carved by fear and fueled by desperation, tells you to chase, to fix, to prove, to fight harder. But this instinct, no matter how natural it feels, is the very thing that will destroy what little connection remains. When a woman begins to emotionally withdraw, most men panic. They try to do more, be more, give more. They turn themselves inside out, trying to bring back what they lost. But here's the brutal truth. The more you try to win her back from a place of fear, the more you push her away. Carl Jung would tell you this isn't just a relationship problem, it's a shadow problem. The part of you that cannot sit in uncertainty is being activated. And unless you understand what not to do, you will end up sabotaging both yourself and her respect for you. 1. Don't beg, chase, or cling. When she pulls away, your wounded inner child may scream. Do something, don't let her go, but you must resist that urge. Desperation is not attractive, it's repelling. What you're showing her in those moments is that your emotional center is outside of yourself, that your worth depends on her approval, and whether consciously or not, she will lose respect for that. Because respect dies when a man betrays his own dignity. Begging for love doesn't resurrect it. It buries it. When you chase someone who's pulling away, you're not showing love. You're showing fear of abandonment. And that fear is loud. It makes you say things you'll regret. It makes you overcompensate. It makes you act like a child, not a man. You think you're trying to win her back, but what you're really doing is teaching her that you have no boundaries, no spine, and no inner ground to stand on. In Jungian terms, your shadow takes over. The part of you that's terrified of rejection now runs the show. And he doesn't care about truth, dignity, or self-respect. He just wants relief. But relief at the cost of your integrity is never worth it. 2. Don't demand explanations. Tell me what's wrong. Why are you acting like this? Just be honest with me. These sound like reasonable requests, but in the wrong moment, they are poison. When someone begins to emotionally detach, it's rarely something they can clearly articulate right away. And if they feel interrogated or pressured to explain what they themselves may not fully understand, pushes them deeper into retreat. Most men demand clarity not because they care about her truth, but because they can't tolerate the anxiety of not knowing. But that anxiety is yours to hold, not hers to soothe. You don't need her to give you a reason in order to validate what you're already sensing. If you feel her pulling away, trust your perception. You don't need a confession to begin protecting your emotional reality. You don't need to turn her disinterest into a courtroom drama where she's on trial. Silence is a message. Distance is a message. Change in tone is a message. Learn to listen without forcing her to speak. 3. Don't turn your pain into punishment. This is where the shadow shows its fangs. When you feel rejected, you might not beg. You might not plead, but you might punish. With coldness, with withdrawal, with sarcasm, with passive aggression. You might start posting subtle digs online. You might mirror her energy to make her feel what you're feeling. But let's be clear, that's not strength. That's ego wounding masked as self-respect. You're not regulating your emotion, you're outsourcing it. You're hoping she'll notice your emotional shift and come back to make it right. But love doesn't respond to manipulation. It responds to authenticity. Jung taught that the parts of ourselves we reject become our shadow. And when triggered, they don't just hide, they retaliate. So ask yourself, are you trying to be powerful or are you trying to be petty? Are you grounded or are you just trying to win? Because the moment your pain turns into performance, you've left the path of truth. Real masculine energy holds emotion without weaponizing it. It doesn't need to punish to feel strong. It doesn't need to be cold to feel respected. It feels the loss, but does not self-destruct in response to it. 4. Don't try to become what you think she wants. The moment a woman starts to emotionally withdraw, many men fall into a quiet panic. But instead of expressing it directly, they begin to morph. They study her mood, analyze her tone, scan her behavior for clues, and then shift themselves accordingly, hoping that if they just become the right version of themselves, she'll return to the way she was. This isn't love. It's shape-shifting out of fear. You start silencing opinions, laughing at jokes you don't find funny, offering things you don't actually want to give. You try harder to be pleasing, agreeable, emotionally soft, or emotionally strong, depending on what you think she needs. But none of it is real. And even if she responds, something in her will sense it. This isn't you. It's a simulation of safety, and it never lasts. Jung spoke about the persona, the mask we wear in society, and how dangerous it becomes when we believe the mask is our identity. This is exactly what happens in relationships. Men become what they think is lovable instead of being who they truly are. But here's the irony. The more you try to adapt to what you think she wants, the more you confirm to her that you lack a core. And no one can love a man who has no center. 5. Don't make her coldness about your worth. This is one of the most damaging internal patterns. When a woman becomes distant, many men immediately internalize it. They think, I'm not good enough. I've failed. She sees something in me that's unlovable. This is not emotional intelligence. It's emotional collapse. And it's almost always rooted in childhood conditioning, especially if you grew up around inconsistent affection or conditional love. But her distance is not your verdict. It's not a measure of your masculinity, your attractiveness, or your soul's value. It might not even be about you. She could be dealing with her own internal chaos. She might be confronting something she doesn't understand. Or, yes, maybe she's pulling away for real, but not because you are inherently lacking. Maybe because she's afraid of connection. Or maybe because she's not meant to walk your path anymore. Whatever the reason, your task is not to interpret her distance as proof that you're unworthy. Your task is to stay rooted in who you are, to resist the urge to spiral into self-blame. Because if every shift in her emotion destabilizes your identity, then you are never grounded to begin with. A man with self-awareness can feel hurt without losing his shape. He can grieve without falling apart. And most of all, he knows that her absence doesn't define his presence. 6. Don't collapse into emotional passivity. When some men feel their partner pulling away, they freeze. They shut down emotionally, not out of strength, but out of confusion and fear. They pretend they don't care. They stop expressing themselves. They go numb, not because they've risen above the pain, but because they don't know how to hold it. This stoic silence isn't maturity. It's retreat. Emotional passivity is often misunderstood as calmness. But the truth is, it's usually just a trauma response. You don't know what to do, so you do nothing. You don't want to make it worse, so you vanish emotionally. But women feel this withdrawal, and it doesn't make them respect you more. It makes them feel even more alone in the relationship. It confirms their decision to pull back. Real emotional strength is not avoidance. It's presence. It's being able to say, I feel the shift between us, and I'm not here to control you, but I'm also not going to disappear into silence. It's being able to speak without accusation, to feel without collapsing, to show up without demanding. That kind of presence is rare, and it's unforgettable. 7. Don't make her the source of your emotional stability. This is perhaps the deepest mistake and the hardest to admit. When a woman pulls away and your entire inner world collapses, ask yourself why. Why does her shift throw your nervous system into chaos? Why do you suddenly feel lost? Hollow, panicked, broken. This isn't about her. This is about where you've been placing your center. If she becomes the emotional anchor for your peace, then of course her absence will wreck you. If she becomes the regulator of your sense of self, then of course her withdrawal will unmake you. But this is not love. It's dependency dressed up as connection. Jung would call this a projection of your inner feminine, the anima. When you haven't integrated your own emotional depth, you unconsciously assign it to her. And when she pulls away, it feels like your soul is leaving. But your soul is not hers to carry. Your emotional equilibrium is not her job. Your sense of purpose, groundedness, and worth cannot hinge on her behavior. Otherwise, you're not in a relationship. You're in emotional captivity. When she pulls away, your work is not to chase her. It's to return to yourself, to find a ground beneath your own feet, to hold space for your pain without turning her into the only medicine. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it hurts. But it's the only way you'll ever have a relationship that's based on truth, not fear. 8. Don't confuse silence with strength. There's a narrative many men inherit, passed down in subtle tones from fathers, coaches, or culture. Real men don't talk about their feelings. So when pain shows up, especially in love, many retreat into silence, thinking it's noble. They become distant, detached, emotionless. They believe that if they can just stay quiet long enough, the storm will pass and she'll return. But silence is not always power. Sometimes it's just fear with a mask on. When she pulls away and you respond with total emotional shutdown, you're not showing resilience. You're showing fear of vulnerability. You're showing that you'd rather be numb than real. But numbness doesn't heal. It only delays collapse. And worse, it communicates something deadly to her, that you don't care enough to show up emotionally. Even if you do care, even if you're burning inside, she can't read your silence. She can only feel its coldness. Carl Jung emphasized the danger of repressing emotion. The more you suppress, the more disconnected you become, not just from others, but from yourself. You lose access to your own intuition, to your own truth. You start to believe the lie that detachment is mastery. But it's not. True strength isn't silence. It's expression without chaos. It's being able to say, "This hurts," without expecting her to fix it. It's owning your feelings, not hiding them behind stoic walls. If your response to pain is to go quiet and wait for things to magically restore themselves, you've already surrendered the relationship. Not to her, but to fear. 9. Don't manipulate her with kindness. This one is hard to admit because it doesn't look like a mistake. On the surface, it appears noble. You start doing nice things, buying flowers, cooking dinner, sending supportive messages. You offer help, compliments, patience. But it's not love, it's strategy. You're not being kind for the sake of kindness. You're being kind to control the outcome. And deep down, she feels it. When a woman senses that your generosity is transactional, it stops being generosity. She may not even be able to explain why your affection feels heavy or strange, but she'll instinctively pull away even further. Because at its core, manipulative kindness is still about fear. Fear of loss, fear of being alone, fear of not being good enough. And nothing about fear feels safe or magnetic. The shadow disguises this tactic as virtue. It whispers, "If I'm just a little more patient, a little more understanding, she'll come back." But love doesn't grow through pressure and disguise. It grows through truth. If you're giving in order to get, then you're not loving, you're bargaining. And even if she doesn't consciously see it, her body will know. This man is trying to buy my affection. And that creates guilt, not love. Your strength doesn't lie in how much you do for her. It lies in how clearly you see yourself. If your heart is open, Let it be open without expectation. But if you're giving only to receive, stop. You're not helping her. You're erasing yourself. 10. Don't betray your boundaries just to keep her close. When someone begins to slip away from us, one of the most dangerous instincts is to sacrifice everything just to make them stay. You start tolerating things you once said you'd never allow. You accept disrespect, dishonesty, or disinterest as long as she doesn't walk out the door. You shrink your needs, suppress your truth, and abandon your values, hoping that if you're just flexible enough, she'll eventually come around. But this is the fastest path to self-destruction. Because even if she stays, what's left of you? A man who has taught her that his standards are negotiable, that his voice is optional, that his center is soft clay, easily molded by rejection. And over time, she may not just lose respect for you. You'll lose respect for yourself. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That cannot happen if you keep bending yourself into a shape someone else finds comfortable. If she's pulling away and you respond by erasing your boundaries, you're not saving the relationship. You're participating in its slow death while sacrificing your integrity in the process. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone distances themselves is to let them. Not with bitterness, not with rage, but with clarity, to say, "I feel the shift. I respect your path, but I will not destroy myself to stay on it." That's not cold. That's self-respect. And ironically, it's that energy, the energy of a man who knows his worth, that is the only thing that might ever draw her back. Not because you're trying to manipulate, but because truth always creates gravity. When a woman pulls away and a man responds from fear, he doesn't just lose the relationship. He begins to lose himself, not all at once, but gradually, silently. He becomes a version of himself that no longer feels real. And the tragedy is, he often doesn't even realize it until it's far too late. He believes he's fighting for love, but what he's actually doing is abandoning his essence in the name of attachment. Every time you chase someone who's pulling away, you teach yourself one devastating lesson: that your wholeness depends on someone else's presence. That without her, you're less. And that belief poisons everything. It turns your self-worth into a negotiation. It turns your love into survival. It turns your dignity into a tool you're willing to trade just to feel chosen again. But being chosen means nothing if it costs you your truth. Here's what happens inside a man who forgets who he is for the sake of keeping her close. He becomes hypersensitive to her moods. Every glance, every pause, every text, or lack of one, starts to dictate the rhythm of his day. His nervous system is no longer his own. He's not grounded in self. He's orbiting her. He tells himself he's being attentive, but really, he's become emotionally enslaved. Over time, this creates a fracture in his identity. He starts to mistrust himself. He second-guesses what he says, what he feels, what he needs. He becomes smaller, not because she asked him to, but because he handed over his center, hoping it would be enough to make her stay. But she doesn't stay. Not fully. Not with her soul. Because women don't fall in love with men who make themselves small for love. They may feel sorry for them. They may appreciate the effort. But deep down, they no longer feel that magnetic pull. That gravitational force of a man who is anchored in himself. And they begin to emotionally drift even further. And the man? He panics. He works harder, gives more, shrinks more, until there's almost nothing left of him. Just a performance. Just an echo of the man he once was. Carl Jung warned us, the unconscious will always find a way to express itself. And when a man betrays his truth long enough, the shadow doesn't stay quiet. It begins to leak. He may develop quiet resentment. He starts to blame her for not loving him enough. He turns passive-aggressive, distant, bitter. He may start seeking validation elsewhere, through work, attention, even infidelity, not because he wants revenge, but because he has forgotten how to feel whole without being seen. This is how the wounded masculine mutates, from a man who once had clarity into a man chasing ghosts, into a man who has no idea where his true power lives. Let's be clear, losing a woman you love hurts. It can feel like death, but the real death is not the relationship ending. It's what happens when you give up your sovereignty to avoid that ending. You must understand this. No woman can complete you. She can inspire you, challenge you, hold you, reflect you, but she cannot be your source. And the moment you make her your source, you've already created a false god. And like all idols, it eventually collapses. Not because she's cruel, but because no human being can carry the weight of someone else's soul. And still, it is not too late. Even if you've made all the mistakes, even if you've chased, begged, punished, performed, collapsed, and lost her completely, your power is not gone. It's just buried beneath the fear, beneath the shame, beneath the stories you've told yourself about what it means to be a man when love is slipping away. But to reclaim that power, you must be willing to do the thing you've been avoiding most. You must face the grief, not just the grief of losing her, but the grief of losing yourself in the process. That grief is sacred. It's not weakness. It's not failure. It's the doorway. Through that grief, you begin to feel your own presence again. You begin to remember who you were before you started sacrificing yourself in the name of romantic survival. And from that place, from that inner fire, you begin to rebuild. Not to win her back, not to prove something to her, but to come back into alignment with your own life, your own mission, your own truth. Because here is the paradox. The man who no longer needs her to stay is the man she may finally feel pulled to return to. Not because he asked, not because he begged, but because he remembered who he is. There's a moment after collapse when everything goes silent. Not the kind of silence that's empty, but the kind that feels like something ancient is waking up. You're not trying to fix anymore, not begging, not performing. You're just sitting there in the ruins of who you thought you had to be. And in that stillness, a deeper voice emerges. One that doesn't scream, one that doesn't chase, one that simply says, "Come back." This is where your real power begins, not in getting her back, but in getting yourself back. Too many men think healing is about becoming better for someone else. But real healing begins when you stop trying to be enough for her and start being enough for you. It begins when you stop asking, "How can I make her stay?" and start asking, "Why was I so willing to lose myself just to be loved?" This isn't about cold detachment. It's about rooted presence. It's about becoming the kind of man who no longer needs to control anything outside of himself in order to feel secure. Because once you reclaim your emotional sovereignty, everything changes. Your energy shifts. Your posture shifts. Your eyes stop scanning the room for approval and start holding space for truth. You stop asking for permission to exist. Carl Jung believed that the deepest transformation begins in the darkness, not in escaping it, but in learning how to hold it without fear. And that's exactly what this moment offers you. A confrontation with everything you once ran from. All the insecurity, the fear of abandonment, the belief that love must be earned, the shame of feeling too much or not enough. Let come, let rise, let burn. Because when you stop resisting the fire, you start becoming the man who can contain it. That's what she was searching for, whether she knew it or not. Not a man who could impress her, not a man who could fix her, but a man who could stand in his own soul, unapologetically, without collapsing. A man who could feel pain and still stay open. who could feel rejected and not become reactive, who could grieve and not turn bitter. That man isn't built by charm. He's built by integration. But to integrate, you must first see the masks you wore to gain approval. See the small betrayals of your own truth. See the ways you've made women responsible for your worth. See the subtle games you played in the name of connection. Not to shame yourself, but to free yourself. Because once you see it, you can stop repeating it. You don't need to perform strength. You are strong when you stop abandoning your center. You don't need to manipulate affection. You are lovable when you stop silencing your truth. You don't need to chase validation. You are already enough when you stop outsourcing your identity. From this place of truth, everything becomes clearer. You start to feel what your body's been telling you for years. That peace isn't found in being wanted. It's found in being whole. And no woman, no matter how magical, can make you whole. That is your work, your path, your sacred responsibility. So what does this path look like? It looks like sitting in solitude, not to escape, but to listen, to feel the ache without numbing, to feel the anger without directing it outward, to feel the loneliness without blaming her for not filling it. It looks like rebuilding your rituals, moving your body, sharpening your focus, reconnecting to your mission. It looks like returning to the man you were before the fear took over. Not a perfect man, not a polished one, but a man who remembers his fire, his depth, his boundaries, his worth. And from that remembering, he becomes magnetic again, not because he's trying to be, but because real presence is rare. And women feel that. Not all will return. Some are meant to leave. But the man who has faced himself, the one who no longer performs, the one who walks with depth and clarity, he will never lack love, because he no longer seeks it from emptiness. This kind of man doesn't need to prove himself. He simply is. He doesn't chase love. He creates space for it. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He chooses himself and lets others rise to meet him. That's your path now. Not backward, but inward. Not toward her, but toward you. And from that place, if love comes again, it will not be something you cling to in fear. It will be something you walk beside with open hands and open heart. And if it doesn't come, you'll still be whole. You'll still be grounded, because you're no longer waiting for someone else to complete what was never missing in the first place. You just forgot, but now you remember. There's a strange kind of silence that follows transformation. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. There's no celebration, no parade, no one clapping for you. And yet, something is forever changed. You walk a little slower, breathe a little deeper, not because life got easier, but because you did something most never do. You faced the truth. You stayed with yourself. When she pulled away, you could have collapsed. You could have turned it into a war. You could have begged, chased, disappeared, manipulated, or broken your own soul just to feel wanted. But you didn't. Or maybe you did, and then woke up. In that moment of waking, of saying no more, of reclaiming your center, that's everything. Because there's nothing more powerful than a man who no longer seeks himself in someone else's reflection. That doesn't mean you're invincible. It doesn't mean the pain is gone. It means the pain no longer owns you. It moves through you, not as a master, but as a messenger. It tells you where you were still living on autopilot, where you outsourced your identity, where your wounds were still making your choices for you. And then, gently, it lets you go, if you let it. Carl Jung didn't promise peace. He promised confrontation with the self. The deep work of individuation, the terrifying unraveling of false selves, the liberation that comes only when you stop running from your own shadow. And this moment of heartbreak, rejection, emotional distance, this was your initiation, not into bitterness, but into wholeness. Now, you begin again. You begin with less noise, fewer illusions, less addiction to being needed, more space, more awareness. You start to notice things you used to miss. Your own inner reactions, your own voice, the energy you used to waste trying to be everything for someone who is no longer present. You stop trying to decode what every message means. You stop fighting to resurrect the past. You stop defining love as control. You begin to love differently, more quietly, more clearly, more honestly. You don't cling. You don't perform. You simply offer presence. And if someone walks away from that presence, you let them. Because you know what your presence is worth now. You've sat in it. You've watched yourself fall apart. You've seen how much of you is built around fear. And now you know what's left when the fear is burned away. What's left is you, not the version shaped by approval, not the one trained to win love, but the one who is simply here, awake, grounded, breathing, listening. And this man doesn't need a woman to complete him. But when love does return, if it returns, it meets a man who no longer fears the loss, because he's already lived through it and found himself on the other side. That's what makes him dangerous, not in a cruel way, but in a free way. A man who is no longer afraid to lose you will never need to control you. A man who doesn't need you to make him whole will never try to take more than he offers. A man who can feel deeply without drowning is the rarest kind of man, and the world feels him. She feels him, even if she doesn't say it, even if she never comes back, because something in her will know. He's no longer seeking a rescuer. He's no longer seeking a mirror. He's no longer seeking permission to exist. He's home, in himself. And from that place, anything is possible. Not because he needs anything, but because he's finally aligned with everything that matters. So what now? You continue. You don't wait for her to return. You don't wait for closure. You don't wait for certainty. You walk, not away, but deeper, into your own path, into your own center. You begin to build, not to prove, not to impress, not to distract, but to create. Because creating is what a man does when he remembers he has power. He builds things that last, not just businesses or muscles or plans, but character, depth, integrity, emotional gravity. You don't need to punish her. You don't need to erase her. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. That is the deepest loyalty you can ever offer, to stay with yourself no matter who else leaves. And if the day comes when love returns, whether through her or someone new, you won't need to chase it. It will recognize you. It will see the man who has faced himself and didn't flinch. The man who sat in the dark and didn't run. The man who lost what he thought he needed and found what he never knew he had. And that man, he doesn't fall in love to feel alive. He is alive. And from that place, he doesn't just love. He leads.